So this webinar is going to be all about exercise regressions. So pretty much the opposite to exercise progressions, but just as important, I think, in certain situations. So we're going to go into it, hopefully help you to understand what they are and why you might need them in your exercise program. There we go. Okay. So what is an exercise regression? So pretty much you're just simplifying the exercise one way or another to make it easier for you to do. So we know we always want to try and progress and make things harder, more difficult, get us stronger, get us fitter, get us more capable and more able. But sometimes there is a need to simplify an exercise, and we're going to go into that now. So why may we need to regress exercises? So there's three main reasons. So first of all is your skill level. So if you're new to the gym, we're not going to put you in at a barbell squat immediately. We want you to learn that skill, be confident and comfortable with that skill before we progress you up to a back squat with a barbell. So if you've got back squat with a barbell as your main exercise, we can take that down with a goblet squat with a kettlebell or a dumbbell here. We can take that down to a banded squat. We can take it down to a bodyweight squat. We can take that down to a box squat. So there's 4 or 5 levels before we even get to a barbell, and then we can progress that on with added weights and stuff like that. So your skill level, if you're not ready to hold a barbell, balance the barbell, control the movement with a barbell, we'll regress that skill, that movement down to suit your skill level, and then build you back up from there. So training volume. So as you work out, you need to recover at some point. So if your training volume is becoming too much, you're getting achy, fatigued, you're not feeling as strong or as motivated, sometimes it'd be good to regress an exercise, simplify it so that it's easier for you to complete. So you still get your workouts in, but you're just working at a lower intensity or a lower kind of complicated type of exercise. So this can also be called a deload. So instead of maybe doing 3 sets of back squats at 40 kilos, we might just ask you to do 3 sets of 10 squats at a 20 kilo goblet squat, for example. So we're halving the weight, making an easier movement, but still doing the movement, but it's just easier to do. This takes down the stress on your muscles, on your joints, on your central nervous system. It allows you to recover a little bit, gives you a little bit of a break between kind of pushing your foot down on the pedal, but doesn't stop the momentum and the kind of habit and routine of you going to the gym. So we can adjust your training volume through regressing an exercise. We could keep the weight the same and just do a simpler exercise. Instead of doing a back squat, we could do a leg press at a similar weight. We're taking away the control, the balance, and the full body kind of core activation part of the squat, but we're still putting the same weight through the legs in a similar movement. So there's ways we can do it. And recovery. So if you're recovering from an injury, if you're coming back from holiday, if you had a bit of a break from the gym for whatever reason, it can be a good thing to regress an exercise that you were currently doing or were doing before the injury or the holiday, and then build you back up to that level. So again, if you were doing back squats before your holiday, 2-week holiday, you come back, don't feel quite confident or comfortable holding that weight, go back down to a goblet squat or a leg press, build up the confidence and the strength in your body and your muscles, and then we can go back to the back squat. So it's just, as you can probably tell, most of the time we're regressing things to then progress them further. So regressing isn't a thing we want to do all the time, but it's something we can do and need to do at certain points in your training program or your training life generally. So if you think we want you to train from now until forever, pretty much, and at some point we're going to have to take down a movement because of it's either you're not skilled enough to complete it yet, you're not mobile enough to complete it yet, you're not strong enough, stable enough, all these things might come into it. So we'll regress it down and then build it back up later. Training volume, you can't train at 100% all the time. It's like driving a car at 100 miles an hour, you're going to crash at some point. So allowing yourself to take a step back, deload a little bit, or after an injury, go down to then build yourself back up again. So regressing is always a good idea in the right circumstances, but it is a way for us to get back to progressing again later. Ooh. Cool. Kinds of exercise regression. So if you've watched the progression webinar, this is very similar, but just the opposite. So you can decrease the weight. So you can do exactly the same movement, just decrease the weight slightly. So back squats with 40 kilos, we can then do back squats with 20 kilos. Very easy way to make an exercise easier. Keep the reps the same, keep the sets the same, keep the time of rest the same. We're just making it easier through reducing the weight. This way we can keep the weight the same, but we're going to decrease the volume. So either reduce the reps, maybe from 10 down to 8, or maybe from 4 sets down to 3. So we're reducing the overall volume we're using, but we're keeping the weight the same. You can increase your rest period. So we can keep the weight the same, we could keep the volume the same. We'll just allow you to have maybe 2 to 3 minutes rest instead of 60 to 90 seconds, so almost doubling that rest in between, just to let your body just recover a little bit more before we try and do it again. That's a way to make exercises seem easier without taking away kind of the weight or the volume that we're lifting. You can change equipment, like we said. If you go from a barbell back squat, but you don't want to reduce the reps, the weight, or increase the rest period, you can just change it to a simpler exercise like a leg press. You're still working your muscles very hard at a very similar weight, but you just don't have the cognitive need of balancing, controlling an unstable barbell. Everything's fixed in place. All you've got to do is push hard. So it makes it an easier version of the exercise, so we can keep the weight and the reps and the rest the same. Different grips. So we use this as an example here. So a wide pull down is going to be more difficult than a close pull down. So if you're feeling particularly tired, fatigued, or just not super motivated, doing a wide pull down can be a lot harder to do than a close one. So you could just change the grip ever so slightly, make the exercise easier. You're still doing a very similar movement. You're still flexing your lat here and bringing it down. It's just our hands are at a slightly different position to make it easier. So same movement, made easier. You do more stable exercises. So instead of doing lunges, split squats, Bulgarian split squats, you just do squats or leg press. So making it more stable is easier for your body to do. 2 legs working instead of 1 takes the pressure off immediately, because you're spreading that weight across 2 legs rather than putting it all onto 1. But also, again, core doesn't have to work as hard because you're not putting yourself off balance on purpose. And so it just makes everything a lot easier. So still working the same muscles in a very similar way. So a squat and a lunge are very similar if you look from the side of the angle of the knee, angle of the hip, but it's just less pressure through that 1 leg as it is spread across 2. And you can manipulate the angles. So I've used this image here for press up. So when you're flat on the floor for a press up, that can be very hard. If you're up against the wall, that's very easy. But you can go anywhere in between to find that right level for you. So if you feel like, you still want to do the same amount of reps, you still want to use your body weight for press ups, but getting to the floor level is too hard, use a step or a box or a bench or a barbell, lift it off the floor by a foot or 2. Makes the exercise a bit easier. Still hitting essentially a press up movement. Your core's engaged. You're working your chest, your shoulders, your triceps. Everything else is the same. You can practice the skill of a press up. You're just reducing the difficulty of it to make it simpler for you to do. So there's a lot of ways we can make exercises easier. We don't have to do all of them. We can just do 1 or 2. We could do a couple of them altogether, depending on how much you need to regress an exercise. You can also regress exercises because you don't like them. Personally, I have a love-hate relationship with squats. My hips and ankles don't always like squatting. So I used to get frustrated by it. Instead of getting frustrated, I now have alternatives which you could class as a regression. So instead of doing squats one day, if my body just doesn't like it, if I stretch and warm up and it just doesn't like it, I'll regress down to a leg press or a hack squat and just use that as my main exercise to push really hard, really heavy. So if something is just not feeling good for your body, if you just don't enjoy the movement so much for whatever reason, we can change it, and that could be a form of regression. If that happens randomly, like my hip plays up randomly, I can have a month where it's perfect, I'll squat 2-3 times a week, and then I might have a month where I can't squat at all because my hip is just screaming at me. So it's good to know these options just in case that might happen. So that's it for this webinar. Hopefully you found it useful. It's always good to have an idea of a progression and a regression for each exercise, because if you go to the gym and the squat rack is taken, you can't use it. Having something instead is really handy to have. Because if you're just following your workout, you go, oh, I've got a squat, and then they're all taken, you're stood there waiting. You can just change it and go, right, I'll do a leg press today, or I'll do a hack squat today, or whatever. It's always good to have that. Build your confidence in the gym, allows you to carry on your workout, you're not waiting around for equipment. So hopefully that's helpful. And yeah, again, let me know if you've got any questions and I will answer them as best as I can.